Oh, hello everyone. This is Brian Smith with Inside the Knights. I am getting ready to discuss a little college football. Hopefully, everybody is ready to talk some football on a Friday night. I know that the news with Oklahoma and with Texas going to the SEC, I'm still a little bit dismayed by it, but at the same time, it has positive impacts as well. So hopefully, UCF can benefit from it. But it's going to be really interesting the next couple weeks because the news, the timing of it, that's pretty interesting to say the least. That is pretty interesting. All right, I want to get started with the following statement just to kind of start off. My name is Brian Smith. I am the publisher at Inside the Knights. I cover UCF, specifically football. From now, I'll branch out as time goes on. I've got some guys that are going to come on and work with me. But at the most important point of this, just to say the following statement before I dive into all the news regarding Texas, regarding Oklahoma, regarding all the different people, is the following. I will be a deep dive into UCF football recruiting daily. Moving forward, I'm not going anywhere. I love living in Central Florida. It's not going to change. I love the high school scene here, and I am going to be at the website that you see scrolling across the bottom of this screen. Highlights, videos, talking about all the different opportunities for people to jump around and get crazy in the bounce house. You name it. If it's revolving around UCF football, I will be involved. So just keep in mind that that's going to be part of it as I move forward. And I really look forward to it. Gus Malzahn and his staff have been really cool with me. They let me come around the program and just kind of watch the camps and stuff. And it's, just being there is great. I have the opportunity now to get ready to dive into all the high school football fall camps. It's a blast. So it's going to be a lot of coverage. And I actually have a little bit of recruiting news regarding UCF here in a little bit. But since today is the big day regarding nothing else around college football besides, just Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, just an average day. Haha, kidding. This is a very big deal, and it has numerous layers. In fact, one could argue that this is a situation where if and when it does come about, and from what I understand, it would be 2025 is when that contract would be up with the Big 12 for those two institutions. And how this works is very simple. Like it or not, the only thing that matters in college athletics would be advertisers. The TV, when you say, oh, they've got a TV contract, what that really means is advertisers like that conference. We like it, we dislike it, it doesn't matter. Everything is based on advertising. This is not any different. How college football coaches get paid, how stadiums go up, the bounce house. You really think they wanted to name it the bounce house? They gave them a lot of money. Advertising. It's a part of the system, and I can't really put it in perspective any more than the following. Football is a situation where if you're going to find a way to move up the ladder, you need to find ways to affiliate yourself with a lot of different people that have the ability to make money too. And that's why the SEC is gobbling up Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, it's not something that's going to go away because there could be others. There's rumors about Clemson, Florida State, Ohio State. And I'll get to that in just a second really quick because I have a very strong opinion about all three of those schools and what they should or shouldn't do and what I think they actually will do. But here's the headliner of this, and it will really tick off a lot of people, and that's too bad. Because advertising changes everything, and I do mean everything, Texas is the biggest player in college football. Oil money, American Airlines, Ford's a big player in that state. There's so many different things. The engineering in that state, because of the oil and gas market, especially in South Texas, is humongous. The tech market is now huge around Austin, where the University of Texas is. It's centrally located in the state. The north suburbs of Austin are some of the most highly rated places to live in the United States. Dell and different places have headquarters and different things there. This is the biggest player because of advertising. I'm not saying they're the best program because they are far from it. Texas and Georgia are by far the most underachieving programs in college football over the last 50 years. There's no question. Based on their resources and opportunities, take your pick of which one of the two. Texas and Georgia have failed the most, considering their talent level and all the talent available to them within their respective states. Stating that, Texas moving, forget Oklahoma for just 1 second. If it was just Texas, it changes everything for two main factors. The SEC now gets an extended package in the state of Texas because their A&M, Texas's big rival, is already in the Southeastern Conference. So that's multiple times teams can go into Texas and play almost every weekend, and you know they're going to schedule it this way. The SEC will have either A&M or Texas at home every weekend to make sure newspapers, guys like myself, the writer that covers both Texas and Texas A&M for Sports Illustrated, for instance, they want him at a home game, one of those two, all the time. All the time. It's exposure because of recruiting. I guarantee you Nick Saban loves the idea of Texas coming in to that conference. He may not be coaching anymore, but just the way that guy thinks and how coaches in general think, how can I get into a market that presents an opportunity for my institution that I represent a better chance to get even more talent than what we have today? That's what Texas is about for the coaches. And then the money and the athletic directors, you open up a market for all your schools to be associated with Texas just because they play them. Even if it's women's gymnastics, a non-revenue sport, if you're going to that campus, there's more opportunities to network. There are more opportunities for fans to get to know it. Over and over and over. Advertising, 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 advertising. And then you have the obvious that comes with all of this. The Big 12 loses something, they have to gain something. And that's where UCF comes in. The SEC is not going to take UCF, and the ACC is not, and here's why. This recruiting I just talked about for the Big 12, they want to add the state of Texas as much as they can. Well, they're not going to add a Florida school because the Southeastern Conference programs, just to use that as the first point, they all recruit Florida. Why would they give a school that's located in Orlando, one of the best cities in the country, and arguably the second or third best market in the state of Florida, which is ridiculous. Miami's number one, but it's incredible how much talent's there, and it's the 10th largest market. Why would you give UCF that stamp of the SEC? You'd have to be a fool. It's not going to happen. Florida would have a fit. And I know the UCF and Florida hate each other, blah, blah, blah. That's not even what it's about. Even if they got along, it is horrific for Florida, just for them in particular, because they would not be the only Southeastern Conference institution within the state of Florida borders. You need to have an advantage. That's what it's about. It's about bias. It's about advantage. It's about proximity. That is football because that is also saying recruiting. UCF is not going to get that. The ACC has two programs already in the state, the rivals, Florida State in the north end of the state and Miami down in the southern end. They don't want UCF for the exact same reason the Gators don't. But the Big 12, that's where it's interesting. Oklahoma and Texas Bowl, hey, they need more members. It's true, they need more members. And B, the other aspect of it, that opens the market to Florida for them, just like it would even more for the SEC because they're gaining Texas. That helps them. And the brand of Oklahoma helps too, don't get me wrong. But as far as the schools care, they care more about Texas. That's just, it's not even negotiable. It's not even close. The most important thing for everybody to understand is the advertising, the marketing, and all that. That's the money. It's the boring part, but it's still the most, impactful. That aside, Texas going to the SEC opens the floodgates for even more recruiting, as if the SEC needs another advantage. I get it. That also tells me that UCF is going to have overtures. They're going to have discussions. They'll all deny. They'll deny and they'll deny. They lie on their grandmother's grave. Some athletic director in that conference over there. That's just how the back door works in college football. Nobody admits anything. They all bold-faced lie. Just like college coaches sit up there in front of all the media and tell us that nobody's hurt going into a game when they know half their roster's dinged up. It's just the way it is. They have nothing to gain. That being stated, UCF going to the Big 12 would mean three things to me. Number one, it opens recruiting for them in Texas. Again, this goes back and forth. Number two, the money that would come into it, because the Big 12 will still get major contracts, whether it's Fox, whether it's ABC, somebody will. That will play itself out. Give it a little time. And again, it's not till 2025 until we're talking about a situation where Oklahoma and Texas will leave. This is not very important here. Very, very, very important. Oklahoma and Texas are not jumping ship now. They're not changing the opportunity to schedule teams this year. Schedules are set. That's the way it is. They're not going to just jump ship. Now there's lawyers involved. They could buy something out and it could go quicker, but it's not real likely. It's hard to move conferences really quick. To put it in perspective, it's like government, federal government, slow, very slow. There's a lot of pieces in place, and it's not just your football program when you move conferences. You got to remember, football fans are very narrow focused people. It's the entire athletic department you're talking about more often than not. And when it is the entire athletic department, does it benefit your baseball team? Does it benefit all the opportunities for your people to travel? How does it help academics? How does it hurt? And again, the word that nobody wants to hear, what's the money? Except for football and for some programs, basketball and or baseball, like LSU makes some money off their baseball program. Nebraska did at one point. Everybody else loses. All the other sports lose money. So if you add travel, it hurts. You need to have a very specific plan. And this stuff is thought out and looked at for a long time. Because once you put pen to paper, you're in, buddy. That's it. Texas is making so much money, it doesn't matter. Their boosters are so deep pocketed, it doesn't matter. They can just do whatever. That's a different animal. They do not count. They are above all else in college football because of oil money. Can't change it. It's just location. Oil money, oil money, oil money. Oklahoma has a lot of that same advantage, but it's not as advantageous in regards to the state for recruiting and stuff. The kids in that state don't leave. Oklahoma, LSU, etc. They don't care about that state. The kids don't do it. They're just a brand that helps the conference get a TV contract, and it helps absorb some of the problems that they have away and bringing it to them. It'll be interesting to see what they do, because if they both go, that's two spots open. I think UCF would be one of the schools they would bring in, but who's the other? That one is very debatable, and that's important to UCF as well. UCF is coming up this ladder. What about Memphis? That's a possibility. What about Cincinnati? That is also a possibility. I mean, West Virginia, here's the oddball thing with the Big 12. I was going through my head for the show, and I'm like, this school, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. I'm missing somebody. Who is it outside of the state of Texas is in the Big 12? It's West Virginia. I mean, they're way up there. That's northeast of the state of Kentucky, and it's in the Big 12. But that's the truth. Then there's Texas Christian, there's Texas, there's Baylor, and there's Texas Tech. They have 10 schools in the Big 12. I know it's goofy. But with two leaving, you're talking about an opportunity for two to join, maybe more. I don't know what they're going to do. I think Nebraska would be a possibility to come back. They have done terrible in the Big Ten. There's no way around it. I think that is a very distinct possibility and would be intriguing. They have stunk at recruiting compared to what they should have, and that brand and that fan base is not happy. They are about yay close to firing a former UCF coach, in my opinion, because if they go 7-5, 8-4 this year and get smoked a couple of times, and here's a little hint, they will, he's in trouble. The problem they have is who the heck you're going to hire, because it's just not a destination place for recruits. It's in the middle of nowhere. How are you going to get that to work? It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. So I think Nebraska, when they were rolling, 70s, 80s, 90s, especially with Tommy Frazier, who's a Florida kid, ironically, played at Manatee High School in Bradenton, Florida. They were winning they get a few Florida kids here or there, but they recruited Texas and California a lot. And they would play somebody from those states a lot of the time. If they joined the Big 12, that would be a very big part of adding something to that conference that's needed. You got to have another marquee name. The other possibility, and I'm sure it's been discussed a lot, what about Colorado coming back? What about Arizona or Arizona State? There are different ways to do it. Arizona would be very intriguing for the Big 12 because of basketball. Obviously, it's a very good basketball school. Herm Edwards is the head coach at Arizona State, and the football program there, although they've not like overwhelmed everybody, he makes it an intriguing program as well. And then you also have a situation where Hurley is the basketball coach. So those are a couple possibilities. And all these factors must be taken into account if you're going to really consider going. You can't just go blind. Again, these things move very slow. Will UCF talk about this at all? No. First thing, I'm sure I'm going to get some questions and some comments and everything. It's a lot of fun. I just don't really know what else to put on. I'm trying to type some comments here, but it's very difficult to get accurate information when these things start. For somebody that's been around media for over 20 years, I can tell you there will be deliberate information that is negative put out there, misleading stuff. Because I've had people from major institutions ask me to put out stuff, literally, in the past. They want to redirect and or they want to take shots at other people, but because of political correctness, one of the worst phrases ever, schools are afraid to do it. They ask media members to do it. Any major media member that you come in contact with that tells you that they haven't had somebody contact them and do that is lying. Period. Lie. It's something that's very common. And everything is about message and media and marketing and advertising so that if they do make a move, they want everybody happy with them before they do something that's big. Some fans with UCF wouldn't be happy about a Big 12 move. It is what it is. I can tell you this much, regardless of whether they do or don't, the decision will be based on one primary factor, and it's a dollar sign. That's just the way it is. The bounce house, again, it wasn't named the bounce house because that's what they wanted it to be called. That's dollar bills, y'all. Dollar bills. So the Big Ten, I got somebody here say join the Big Ten. I mean, that's plausible. And the Big Ten in some ways would be very benefited by that. But the travel aspect of it, like Northwestern is in Chicago, in Evanston, it's a part of Chicago. The travel is terrible. And it would be especially difficult on the UCF student athletes. Plus, for UCF specifically, just to answer Mello's point here, the financial end of that beyond football would be horrific. How do you make that work? I don't know. It's not a lot better to the Big 12, but they might be able to work out something with some of the airlines on something special, whether it's the Big 10 or Big 12. It's very difficult. I don't know. I just had a question from Luke Walker. Who do you think is leading for Raymond Cottrell? I know Raymond pretty well. He grew up a UF fan, but he's got offers from Alabama, from Florida State, from Notre Dame, from Florida, Georgia. That kid is all over the map. I know he is actually going to Notre Dame. I want to say it's today or tomorrow to take an unofficial visit. I don't know where Raymond Cottrell is going to go. I had somebody just ask, why would the Big Ten not want to get into Florida? I'm not saying they don't. It's whether or not a Florida school wants to go to the Big Ten. It's the opposite. Yeah, it's tough. And I get what you're saying. If I haven't answered anybody's question, I apologize. I got a whole bunch here on my screen. But it's very difficult for the financial end of it. And I studied this extensively in grad school. There is what they call the bubble, the money that is donated to you. One of the reasons for that number and that word is the following. The bubble means you get big boosters on campus. We're talking seven-figure people. Seven figures doesn't mean nothing. They're happy with you. They write checks. That's it. If you make one of these moves and one of the big fish is unhappy and they don't write checks, it's all for naught. I'm talking about $50 million people, $100 million people. A lot of those kind of donations, whether it's UCF, Syracuse, USC, Texas Tech, doesn't matter where. They do stuff anonymously, and they do it through a lot of different avenues to promote scholarship funds, etc. You have to check with them whether you want to or not. So to answer the question about the Big Ten and UCF, it's pretty simple. UCF could, why wouldn't you at least look at it? I get it. And the Big Ten would like to have more access to Florida. No argument. But here's the problem with that. If you're going to do that, You got to figure out the money in advance, and that is a complex equation that I want no part of. Because when your lacrosse team and your bowling team and all these other teams, the wrestling team, the track team, and all that, they lose money anyway, have to travel even further. And every contest is a flight and not some kind of travel with a bus or a shorter flight, etc. It impacts academics. It impacts who wants to be a coach for you. It is complex. So that yeah, David, it is very tough. Just to answer you, that's something that you just can't get around. I have to take a flight in the morning at 7 a.m. to go to Atlanta. It's like an hour and 33 minutes to get to Atlanta. Just to put it in perspective, if my flight was to Chicago, that would be 2.5 to 3 hours. Now you've got to go to Chicago. And by the way, for those of you who have flown into O'Hare, you know my nightmares too. The place sucks. Atlanta is not much fun either. They're two of the worst in the world because they're just so massive. Add that for college students, a whole bunch of them who are easily distracted and coaches having to deal with it. That's not what they want to add to their plate. I can vouch for that from talking to coaches. That's one of the things. Travel sucks. It makes it worse on families. The divorce rate for coaches, regardless of sport, is high because of travel and recruiting. This may not be very politically correct, but it's just true. Most women are not going to sit around at night and on weekends and not have their husband around. That's why college basketball and football coaches are divorced quite often. Just is what it is. There's no way they can't do their job and not screw up their marriage. It's not natural. The people that stand by their husband or their wife that's in coaching, gotta love them, but they are a rare breed because most of those relationships are strained from the get-go because there's no way to tell your wife you're going to not see her more than once in the next 2 weeks. That never goes well. Now you're going to tell, your AD is going to tell you, hey, we're going to go to Chicago, we're going to go to Columbus, Bloomington, East Lansing, Ann Arbor, etc., or we're going to go to Lubbock, Texas, we're going to go to Waco, we're going to go to Austin, Fort Worth, and then we're going to go to Podunkville in Iowa to go see Iowa State. And it's in Ames, Iowa. It's about yay big. That's not what your wife wants to hear. So it's the same kind of deal. What do you do? But looking at this list here, there's something else that's interesting about this. If UCF joins the Big 12, and again, since we're using that as the example, I'll continue with it. UCF in the Big 12 presents what could happen to several other schools. I just think they're the most attractive of the American Athletic Conference because of Dylan Gabriel, and they're good, and the Big Cat Bryant, they've got some really good players, but it's because of Florida. It's the same thing that the football coaches have flat out openly admitted, and I know from being around, they're selling Orlando, the fun, the sun, and for anybody that follows UCF, it hasn't really engaged in the campus and whatnot, and I know a lot of the people on here, they're alums and whatnot. The east side of Orlando is heaven. It's not a very difficult sell. The campus is beautiful. There is all kinds of shops, coffee places to eat, anything you want within a 5-mile radius of that campus is there. They can sell that to whether it's the Big Ten, the ACC, whatever they want to try, and they can at least use one of those as leverage. There is the key, leverage. Advertisers are going to want to have something to do with UCF because of Disney and because of all the other attractions. My favorite attraction in Orlando is Gatorland, actually. I'm a big reptile guy. I love alligators. They've got crocs and gators there. It's on the south side of Orlando, not all that far from UCF. You can do all kinds of advertising, and I imagine that some of the NIL stuff, the name, image, and likeness for players, you might see somebody promote Gatorland or something. It could be a wrestler, it could be a baseball player, or anything else. But all of the different attractions, you want to see Shamu, it's right there, SeaWorld, they're not very difficult to sell. The last point I'll make on this before I just go into recruiting in general is this. All this attention will get UCF without their effort at all into the news over and over, the spin cycle, okay? It will help recruiting because just by osmosis, they're going to get dragged in. ESPN, Fox, ABC, Sports Illustrated, and obviously I cover UCF. But even like John Garcia, who's my buddy, he is the director of recruiting, and he lives here in the greater Tampa area where I do too, just outside the city. And I guarantee he's going to talk about the opportunities too, because he's fascinated with it. He's just a football fan like I am that is in the business. That's what people are going to do. We talk to coaches at all levels, high school, college, pro, people coming around. You're going to talk to them. It's going to get kicked around. And then what happens? It gets kicked around to high school coaches and they talk to the prospects. Spin cycle. UCF, even if they don't move conferences, is going to gain from this. That's what's hilarious. So with that, I want to talk about two players as I transition here. There's a little bit of recruiting news going on, but this is the lull before the storm. Think of it this way. June was massive. All these visits. Some kids took 4 and 5 visits. They just knocked that out of the park. Good for them. Some waited a little bit, took some unofficials and stuff right after July 4th, through that area, some commitments. But the fall camps are starting this next week and into early August, depending on your state, depending on your high school. Okay? The University of Florida, for instance, is having a Friday Night Lights I might be going to, not this weekend, but next weekend. And then it's just like full bore for high school players. Are all going to camps for their own high schools around the state and throughout the Dixie. But UCF may or may not get commitments in the next week or two. It's hard to say. These kids change their mind constantly. But there are 2 prospects that I know that they're involved with that I have no idea when they're going to commit. They're not going to take calls. It's part of it. Seniors, by this point, just as a reference point, they don't want to hear from guys like me. They've been bothered so much. They're going to announce when they're going to announce. If I get a tidbit from somebody, it's great. But the 2 players are as follows. Jarrell Stinson, he's a guy that visited in June. He had originally committed to Auburn, and he is a big-time corner. He is elite speed. He's a kid that could give up football and just run track. He's like 10-3 in the 100 meters. He's out of the state of Alabama, was committed to the Tigers. How ironic, considering Coach Malzahn was at Auburn from 2013 through 2020 as the head coach, and it was also the offensive coordinator from 2010 through 2012. With that being said, UCF is definitely in the mix there. They need depth. They need more speed. They need more playmaking ability at corner. And the way their cornerback roster is built up right now, it's more big guys. They've got some length at corner. It's fantastic what UCF has. Adding another burner, he's, to put it in perspective, Jalen Robinson, the receiver for UCF, this kid's like that. Twitchy. Put his foot in the ground and go. With that being said, he could play slot corner, or he could actually probably play slot, but slot corner, which is a very difficult thing to play. I talked a little bit about it today in the article I wrote about Armstrong, but you can play different players. You can play a corner, you can play a safety, you can play a hybrid. Armstrong's a hybrid guy. He'll play some linebacker. But depending on who you play against, if they've got a really twitchy guy they just consistently put in the slot, and you don't have somebody like Stinson who can fly, they will eat you alive. They can almost tell you what they're going to do if you don't have a matchup there. It's like that position is equivalent to a basketball point guard who is just way faster than everybody else on the court. And if there's a bad shot and it's a long rebound or something, it's a breakout. 2-on-1, he's faster than you. He creates an opportunity for his buddy for a dunk, and they're on ESPN. Same thing in football. If you don't have somebody over that slot that's good, that can really cover in a man-to-man, just straight up, I'm better than you, a mano, you're in trouble. And then, of course, there's bracket coverages and a bunch of complexities, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, that you can use them with as well, run fire zone, blitzes, and all that, because speed gives you opportunity as a defensive coordinator and as a secondary coach. And I know Travis Williams and David Gibbs, the co-coordinators, and they cover linebacker and safety and corner for their position groups. They can't wait to do a lot of things with the athleticism they have on defense at UCF, but adding more pieces like Stinson, that would be great. UCF is in that mix. I'm not saying they're getting him. I don't know a date or anything like that, but he is in that mix for UCF. It's also very important to get him or somebody of that ilk this year because they've invested so much time in the state of Alabama. There are 3 states that I have long said are like Fort Knox when one of the in-state schools want a player. Those states are as follows: Louisiana, Ohio, and Alabama. LSU, Ohio State, and Alabama. Those fan bases are bonkers. The kids are brainwashed. I went to LSU for a semester in grad school, and it was so weird, I got out of there. Tunnel vision, just complete tunnel vision. If it's not LSU, it doesn't exist to them. And I'm being serious. Like, it just doesn't matter. Just complete blind faith. It's like out of a cult movie. Ohio State fans, I grew up in Indiana. I was around Ohio State fans for a lot of my life. Same thing. The two most difficult fan bases I've ever dealt with, LSU and Ohio State. I haven't had as much experience with Alabama, but dealing with recruiting for over 20 years, I can tell you this much. Trying to get a kid out of that state that Nick Saban wants, or whatever the coach, it could be somebody that's terrible. When Nick leaves, they hire a coach who's terrible. Kids are just born and bred to go play at Alabama. So getting kids out of there is hard. But because Gus Malzahn was at Auburn and he had Travis with him and all these different guys and even some of the administrative people, it's a little different. They have relationships with a bunch of guys. They had Peter Woods on campus this summer. But that name doesn't mean anything to anybody right now, but he's going to be top 3 in the country for class of 23, regardless of position. He is like, he walks by you and you're like, oh, he looks like he's 21 years old and he's 15, 16 years old. Now, he's 280 and he can flat out run. Now, with that being said, I don't know who they're going to get, but they're going to get one or two. If they can get Stinson, it opens eyes because they need a splash. I'm gonna pull up a couple of things here in a second, and just kind of show a few things. But let's just go ahead and do it. I can share my screen so everybody can see what I've got. And it's interesting because there's so many different things that the state of Alabama has. And as you look at what's going on here, if you look at the top of the board, not real surprised. Alexander visited. Emmanuel Henderson committed early to Alabama. Perry has been on campus. Fagans has been on campus. I talked to him recently when I went through the state of Alabama. Great kid. I don't know where he's going to go. I know this is 24/7 site. Miami is a possible destination, etc. It's possible there. They've recruited a lot of these kids. They had Dudley on campus. UCF was a finalist with him. Caden Story's been around the program. He's a kid that's going to choose between UCF and Auburn here really quick. If I had to guess, I'd pick Auburn because of the in-state school. But you got to remember, again, we're talking about with Caden Story. He was on campus and he was around it because it's like 30 miles away where he lives from Auburn when Gus was there. So who knows? Even if he commits, that doesn't mean it's over. Amari Kelly's been around the program. They have an opportunity with him. And there's Stinson. And there's a few guys down this list that could come into play too. Don't be surprised by anybody that's going down this list because this state is ridiculously loaded. And here's the funny part about it. Here is the funny part about it. If you're going to go through this, you have to understand that you're going to have some losses. You're going to probably hit a lower percentage, but you're looking for the big fish. That's the bottom line. UCF really, when they recruit Alabama, this is an example, that state always has defensive ends, corners, positions that are marquee. Quarterback, corner, and D-line, you can just say D-line, but D-end especially. Those are the premier positions. Defending the pass and making the pass. That's what it's about. And, of course, if you're a defensive lineman, you can run into a running back once in a while too. Football is about the ability to make guys miss in space. So you need guys like Stinson, and you need to shorten the amount of time that the quarterback has to get the ball to those little shifty guys. You don't want Jalen Robinson having plenty of time to get open for Dylan Gabriel if you're playing the Knights in your Boise State. I'm sure right now as they scheme for the Knights, guess what they're going to do? They're going to try to throw everything but the kitchen sink at Dylan because they're not going to cover man-to-man against the receiving core that UCF has. Flat out. UCF's receiving core is better than about 75%, and I'm not kidding here, than about 75% of the schools in Power 5. That's how good they are. Now, that's with speed guys, and I'm assuming that Jordan Johnson's going to take a leap. I heard really good things this summer about Jordan Johnson transferring from Notre Dame. He was offered by everybody out of high school. He's from St. Louis, played at one of the private schools, signed with Notre Dame, didn't work out there, had some immaturity issues, what have you. But he's a dude. Athletically, he is a dude. Can you make it happen? Can you find a way to get a guy like that into the system quickly? I think so. So all these things kind of working in their favor. It's going to help with recruiting that one kid from it. They just need to get like 2 out of the 10 that visit. I know that sounds terrible because you can hit a higher number in Florida, and I'm not debating that. It's the linemen and corners per capita in that state. It's crazy how good it is. Then you move over to the state of Georgia. They've already got a couple of guys. Griffin, their wide receiver, is a flat-out stud. He's from an area down in southeast Georgia that is just never going to get any publicity. There's nothing around. Nothing. Savannah is about an hour away, and Savannah would be southeast of where this young man lives. But he dunks on people, and he takes the ball at people's heads in the back of the end zone. We're good. He's 6'4", 200, and he's now just finally focusing on football. He's not going to play hoops this fall. And, of course, they have Thomas Castellanos, and he plays at Ware County. I've already told him I'm going to come up and do a little special on him. He's a great dude, big-time quarterback, and he fits Gus Malzahn's offense very well. I think because of some of that, the following player is getting a little more interested in UCF. And it's interesting because Georgia, you don't really think of them as a recruiting state for UCF. But again, the guys came up from Auburn. Sometimes they would sign 10 kids from the state of Georgia when Gus Malzahn was the head coach at Auburn. They know that state. Nick Jordan is a guy from Jefferson County. He's a hybrid linebacker safety type, and he can fly. He's only about 5'11", 6 foot, 200 pounds. I don't know exactly how they would use him, probably in multiple roles. Ironically, similar to a guy that I featured on Inside the Nights on Sports Illustrated today, Armstrong, can play multiple type of deal. He can blitz off the edge. He can play over a slot guy. And he could probably be a will linebacker. He's probably not going to be big enough to be a Mike and be that true thumper in the middle. Again, he's 200 pounds. But versatility, when you're playing a team that comes out in 2 tight ends, and then, they go power football. 2nd down and 6, same group, but not the same formation. They take those tight ends and move them out. You better have versatility because they can run screen. They could go 4 verts. They could run a running back out of the backfield and just throw him a little flare pass. Alabama did that a bunch last year. You get a guy like their running back at 230 coming downhill. If that tight end makes a great block on the slot defender, whether it's a corner, safety, linebacker, whatever, a corner is trying to tackle a 230-pound guy that's got his pads north and south. They don't want any part of that, I can assure you. That's why guys like Jordan are so important. You need guys that can make plays at what they would call the star position, the hybrid linebacker, depends on the scheme. You need somebody that can make plays there. And I watched this kid's film, and it's fantastic. I'm going to try to pull this back up. We find his film, and it is absolutely fantastic. All right. This kid is one of the fastest players in the state of Georgia, which is saying something. That is not a normal play. There he is playing over the slot. Right after a sack, he comes back on another play, and he's in a position to make it happen. He stops the guy from getting open. Next play off the edge. Watch the acceleration there. That's God-given. And he's a very physical kid, obviously. The other thing that's really interesting about him, he just doesn't stop. A lot of kids wouldn't have went on that play full bore. He chased it down. And I watched his film earlier before I put it on here. He is killing guys. Just killing guys. And he has the opportunity to do so because he's just a hustler. The athleticism helps. That play right there is ridiculous. I don't really know how to even define that. His reflexes remind me of a point guard in basketball. Takes advantage of a missed block. Every play, it's about speed to the ball, and he shocks guys. There he's double teamed, and he still gets away and makes a solo tackle. Basically, what we're seeing here out of this kid is somebody who can come in and take an opportunity to make something happen for UCF very, very quickly. All right. Now, with that being said, if you're going to look at Nick Jordan, does this transcend what they're trying to do defensively long term? And I say yes. From what I've been told, I know John Garcia, I mentioned a little bit ago, He was in Alabama when he worked for 24/7 covering that state. He knew Gus's staff, how they operated, what they wanted, all the things they needed to do, etc. And he told me they were going to take undersized guys, safety linebacker, and speed would come first. It wasn't any longer than that. And like a week later, they had visits, and this kid was on the list. And I'm like, who's this? And for those of you that wonder, like if I've interviewed him, he doesn't do any interviews that I know of. Like he's not active. He's just not that guy. I looked up his video. I'm like, holy cow. But because he's not somebody that goes to all the camps and all that, he's not rated that high. And that's actually good for UCF. He could play at Georgia. No problem. He could play at LSU. No problem. But no exposure really. And, he doesn't necessarily fit what I would call the parameters of the height and weight they want. A lot of coaches, it's ridiculous. Are you this tall? And are your arms this long? And blah, blah, blah. Jordan's pretty lengthy for his size, but he's 5'11", 6 foot. Just to kind of put it in perspective, most defense coordinators, especially at corner, are picky about things unless it's a slot corner. Linebacker is somewhat that way, but look at Eric Gilliard for UCF. He's listed at 5'11". He's listed. I don't know if he's even that tall, but he'll probably be first or second in tackles for the Knights this year. And he'll go to the NFL Combine. I don't know if he'll get drafted or not, but if you're good enough to make it to the Combine, you're a heck of a football player. I think he'll end up making a roster personally because he's going to be a special teams guy and everything else. That is what this kid is, but even faster at the same stage, if I was to guess. And Gilliard can run, so that's saying something. UCF, as far as this last comment about UCF recruiting here, I have no idea if UCF is going to find a way to get a commitment here in the short term, unless it's one of the Alabama, somebody that's already kind of come on campus and visited, because the kids just aren't talking. With that being said, just the law of averages, it probably will happen. And then once we get to September, when the games start taking place again, I would expect a lot of noise, UCF and otherwise, just college football recruiting. The kids, they're tired of guys like me trying to contact them on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. They've seen plenty. They're ready to kind of get it over with, and they want to focus on their high school season, try to chase a state championship for a lot of them. There'll be commitments. I'm really hoping that they find a way to get a couple more defensive guys sooner than later, because that's the biggest need to me. Front seven defensive recruiting. Got to have it. You got to be able to run waves, especially playing in Orlando because it's so hot. You have to rotate constantly. Remember, you're chasing the football as a defensive player. UCF needs more defensive guys. Some of the Alabama and Georgia kids are certainly going to be there. They need to get a big-bodied 3 technique or 1 technique along the defensive line. They also need to get another big-bodied corner. You got to have one in every class. You need a 6 foot or better guy at corner in every single class. It's annoying because it's the hardest thing to get. But they've got some on the roster now, but 2 or 3 kids that are around 6 foot to 6'2", how many of them pan out to be as good as they want? We have no idea. Travis and the rest of his staff has done such a great job getting kids on campus. You just got to wait and see. And they'll have more visits. The NCAA will allow visits come September again, and that'll really help. Bounce House being a loud place, it'll go well. I just don't know who it's going to be. So the last thing that I kind of want to talk about is moving into fall camp. I have not heard yet in terms of how much we're going to have access. I would assume because they're trying to pump up the program, new coaching staff, let's go, uniforms. That's a big part of it too. They've got a lot of uniform stuff going on. They're going to allow quite a bit of access, but I have not heard. I'm going to get asked that a million times, and I get it. No clue. With that being stated, I'm hoping maybe out of, I think the NCAA allows like 20 practices. I'm hoping I have access to at least 4. I have no idea what they'll do. And of that group, I'm hoping that one of the practices being some kind of a scrimmage is available to media, because I like to do things organically. I know some of the roster and whatnot, and I can look up all the stats, but especially O-line, D-line, it's not necessarily about the statistical avenue that I'm trying to approach it from. It's the eye test. O-line above all else is the eye test. And unfortunately, literally the only way to do it is a gazillion reps that I get to watch. You can't really evaluate O-lines DC games. It sucks because it is so complex because you got five guys trying to do one thing. That is complex. And they don't want anybody to know their schemes, most of the schools. I get it, but they're going to try to get more exposure. So perhaps they'll have an opportunity to do some things. I just don't know if UCF is going to be able to do anything that's going to give me the glimpses I want to write the articles I want. It's a catch-22. So that's going to do it. I appreciate everybody coming on that did, and I'm going to be doing a lot of these. I'm going to put some of it in articles, and I'll talk about some of these things in articles. I'll post quite a bit on my I got two different things that I got going on with Twitter, my FB Scout account and then the UCF Fan Nation account. And then, of course, what's scrolling across the bottom of the screen is the main thing. And for anybody that's curious, I will have some guys helping me. There's some students at UCF. Some kids are going to be around the campus. They're going to do some media stuff for me, going to write some articles. I really don't know how soon I'm going to hear anything about Gus and all them letting me in or not letting me in, or in media in general. But everybody will know as soon as I do because I'm excited about it. There's nothing like watching fall camp, man. It's hot as bejesus, and it's not necessarily fun to be sweating to death. Large men running into each other, the violent chess that the game of football is, though, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to see, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm hoping people will kind of come along and look at things from a different perspective, because I'm not going to cover just UCF. I'm going to cover high school football in the state of Florida and Southeast. Nobody will travel as much as I do, period. Won't even be competitive. That being stated, I'm going to thrive with UCF as well, and I'm just going to intermingle the two. That is how this site is going to work. Florida is a great state for high school football for any of you that have the opportunity. Doesn't matter if you live in Lake Wales, doesn't matter if you live in Ocala, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Fort Myers. There's a great game near you on a Friday night. It's within 30 miles of where you're standing. Just up to you to go see it. My advice, make it happen. With that being said, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will be doing some more of these in the very near future when I get more information, especially about the Oklahoma-Texas thing or anything I might hear and how it specifically relates to UCF. I will happily go about throwing that out there, do an article. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in some detail, I hope, by Sunday or Monday, but I'm not just going to throw out speculation. So with that, this is Brian Smith signing off. Everybody have a happy and safe weekend. Be cool and watch the temperatures. It's going to be a blazer this weekend. So everybody have a great night.